Okay, looks like we're live and kicking things off. We are starting to get people coming into the session now. Welcome, everybody. It's nice to have you all here today. If you are returning from the last webinar, thank you for coming back. I obviously didn't do too much of a bad job last time. If this is your first time joining us for this business growth and exit series, then welcome. Really happy to have you here. Certainly seeing names are coming in thick and fast right now. Quite a few names there that I'm familiar with. So hello for all of you who we've met before. Thank you for joining. Appreciate the support. Hopefully you all get a little bit of useful information out of today. Of course, we are talking about a really interesting topic of succession planning. We've talked in previous series about growth and exit planning and strategizing really being flip sides of the same coin. And so, succession really kind of, I think, demonstrates that. It really sort of threads that needle between wanting to ultimately exit one day or needing to be able to exit one day, but also providing you with a really good platform for growth. And that's what succession is, right? It really enables both of those elements. We've still got people joining. So look, I'll be very quick here. If you are seeing this for the first time and you're not familiar with who I am, I won't bore you with a lot of detail here, but my name is Simon Bedard. I'm the founder and CEO of Exit Advisory Group. We're a boutique advisory. We've been around 6 years. There's about 15 people in our team now. And really, we exist to help business owners, right? In our world, business owners are the heroes, and they're the ones who we are trying to support on their journey. Why is that? Well, look, call me a bit old-fashioned maybe, but I actually think entrepreneurs and business owners are fundamentally the people who really change the world. They're the ones who go out there and see problems and actually spend the time, money, effort, take the risk to do something about it. And so I guess I kind of see it as my job to make sure that as business owners go on this journey, that they actually get rewarded somewhere down the end, whether that's financially, with a sense of purpose, whether it's just fulfilling your life goals, whatever it is that floats your boat and drives you as a business owner. We want to help you on this journey because life's hard enough and business is hard enough. So if we can help you avoid a few potholes along the way and help you get to where you want to go, then certainly I'll feel like we've fulfilled our mission. So all right, so I will make a quick comment on the formatting. I kind of screwed this up last time, so I apologise to anybody who might have been dragged out a little bit long. We did say it was a 2020 series, so 20 minutes of me giving a bit of framework and overview and 20 minutes of questions. I kind of just blended a lot of stuff last time. And, I think there was one or two people that were a bit concerned that they kind of hung on too long, or it was an hour and they went a few minutes over an hour. Look, I will just say, if you've got to go, look, I get it. I won't be offended. I certainly don't want anyone dying at their desk listening to my voice. So, if there's something more pressing, look, we get it, right? And if you need to talk and I haven't answered your questions, just reach out. I'm going to put a link in here. For anybody who doesn't get their questions answered, you just need to talk specifically about your scenario. You can book in a call with us and we can just talk about it in private. Okay, so know that is available to you should you need it. So 2020 format, I'm going to take you through a bit of a framework today, and I've got some really good questions. Once again, we got sent a bunch of questions that I think are really useful, and I'm sure you'll all get some benefit out of. So here we go. Looks like we're sort of stabilized here now with people coming in. So welcome if you've just joined us. All right. So really, I guess from the structural side or the framework side of things today, I'm just going to share kind of 8 basic steps for succession planning. Okay. The idea is, as I said, it's a framework, right? It's something that you can think about in your own world, in your own scenario, and even down to the point of, there are some potentially advisors who are going to be on this call and thinking about how to engage with their own clients, or sometimes even just how to raise the topic of the conversation. I've got a lot of accountants in my network, and the amount of times they come to me and say, Simon, oh my goodness, so many of my clients, they're not thinking about this stuff. They really should. but how do I bridge this conversation? One guy actually said to me, how do I tell the patriarch and the owner of this this company, the founder, that it's probably time that he hands the reins over, that somebody with a little more energy and a little bit more kind of drive should really take the reins and take it to that next level. And, sometimes succession is actually about having awkward conversations. And so if you're going to have an awkward conversation, what I'd like to do is give you a little bit of a framework to utilize in those situations. So maybe we take out some of the awkwardness and certainly make it a more productive discussion. Now, having said all that, I'd like to kick off quickly with maybe perhaps why you're here and why you're interested in succession. So I'm going to throw to a quick poll, and really that poll, I hopefully, for those who were here last week, I completely screwed up the tech, and as my staff finished laughing at me and telling me how easy it was, I've realized the error of my ways. So anyway, we have a good question here. Succession planning. Why are you interested in succession planning? Tick all that apply to you. If you're looking at, because you're thinking about selling one day, and, we all understand key man risk, certainly if you're on the last call. Do you have a family business? Do you have kids that want to take over the business, or that you would like them to take over the business? Are you just getting a bit tired and you realize that you need to take some time out of the business and be able to build a company that can run without you? We talk a lot about exiting at Exit Advisory Group, funnily enough. And while selling is one big option for exiting, sometimes exiting means just exiting the day-to-day operations. And if that's something that you're thinking about, then look, this session is certainly going to be very, very helpful for you. One of the things I've talked about before is and just mentioned earlier even, is just using succession as a platform for growth. If any of you on this call run a firm that's in professional services, fundamentally your supply chain, what you do, the value of your company circles around people. And I find people-based businesses really struggle with succession. How do they take the key focus off themselves, often the rainmaker, right? And how do they start to transfer not just those skills, but the drive, and find the right people who can go out and, take the baton and keep running and growing? So it's quite a big challenge. So couple of quick results here that I'll share with you. I'm considering selling my business in the future, and that's about 50% of our audience are thinking about selling. And that makes sense to me. Like, succession is often about how do I ultimately exit. And one of the interesting stats that we've found over the last number of years is that the number of companies that actually get handed down from first generation to second generation has actually dropped now to below 50%. The statistics, depending on where you get them from, vary slightly, but the latest stat I saw was that about 47% of companies get handed down from Gen 1 to Gen 2. Now, if you go back 50 years or 100 years even, like that's unheard of, right? Like, the name, in fact, we often have our own names carried on from our fathers and what kind of role or job they had. So, all the Smiths out there, probably had some sort of blacksmith or some sort of smithing in their family. So, so that handing down of the business and this assumption that you just take over your mother's or father's business is just not there anymore. And for obvious reasons, right? If you think about the level of education and the level of ultimate wealth in the economy these days, people have choices, right? They actually have a lot of choices about what they can do and what they want to be when they grow up. So now, interestingly, Gen 1 to Gen 2, slightly shy of 50% of companies. Gen 2 to Gen 3, it drops away to sub 10%. So from Gen 1 to Gen 3, the latest stats I saw was about 8 to 9% of companies actually make it to Gen 3. Now, that number even surprised me, just at how quickly, we've evolved the way we view business. And look, once again, there can be lots of reasons for that. Kids not necessarily wanting to take over from their parents is a really big factor. But also quite often founders or business owners need to be able to take some capital off the table, right? They want to retire. They want to go do something different. Quite frankly, I get a lot of clients coming through who want to sell because they just want to take their money and go do something different with it. It's not necessarily retirement. They actually might want to go and start another business, or they might be working on more than one business at a time. So lots of reasons why people might take that exit route, and certainly be thinking about succession in terms of selling. So yeah, look, lots of people there looking to reduce their involvement in the company and the operations as well. 35% of people have ticked that box. 100% agree with you there. Looks like we've got about a good chunk of advisors in the room too. So welcome, guys. If there's any other sort of tools, maybe this is a good time to mention that. We do have some tools and downloadables and things we're going to provide after this. So if you're an advisor, you can certainly share those with your clients if you like. Happy to facilitate anything we can to sort of help in those conversations. So very good. So look, I'm going to end that poll now. Thank you all for your contribution on that and sharing your answers. I will just quickly share the results of that because it's probably interesting, and we can certainly make some of this data available if it really kind of floats your boat. All right. Moving on, and very cognizant of time here. So let's start talking through what I've just, at a high level, looking at, termed as the 8 steps of succession. And look, once again, there's going to be stuff outside of this, right? But hopefully you can take a few key elements of this and start thinking about it in your own life. So step 1 is really about what I'm going to call your vision framework, and it's getting that vision framework established. What do I mean by a vision framework? Well, everybody has typically heard of a company vision and a company mission and the company values and stuff like that. And that really is part of it. It's really understanding the why of your business. Why does your business exist? And ultimately, how does that translate into long-term goals for your company? And that fundamentally is your mission. You can call it your BHAG if you want, big, hairy, audacious goal. And usually those long-term goals get broken down. So you might have a 10-year goal or even a long-term 20-year goal, way off in the distance, something that's really challenging but worthwhile pushing for. But ultimately, you need to break it down into the 3 to 5 year goals and ultimately an annual goal, which you can break down into 90-day action plans. Now, that kind of structure, if you're not already using that structure in your business, that's your first kind of tick here, right? And by the way, reach out and get on a call with one of our team if you want to talk through how to do that in your business. This is critical. Like for me, it's your North Star, right? If you don't know what direction you're heading in, how are you ever going to, A, achieve really good goals, but B, inspire people to want to work with you, right? And this is, I'm going to throw out the term here because it's really important to think, but it's, and that is culture. People talk to me about succession planning. They talk to me a lot about roles and responsibilities and hiring and all that sort of stuff. And that's all good. And we're going to get to some of that stuff. But to me, before you kind of get into the weeds with that stuff, I always liken it to what is your mission? What is your vision? Where are you going? Why would anybody be inspired to come and work for your company and work with you? And I say with you, not for you, because to be frank, most people these days don't want to work for somebody else. We all need a sense of autonomy. We all need to be masters of our own domain, whether you have your own company or you're working for somebody else. To me, your culture, the way you do things around here is going to be critical for attracting and retaining talent. Okay. I know culture is a bit of an overused term these days. It's kind of in every bit of content that you read out there, but that's because it's really important. And the culture of your business is really what's going to drive your entire succession plan. So if you haven't got an inspiring mission and vision, it might be time to start thinking about that. And by the way, for those who haven't heard of Simon Sinek yet, I almost struggle to imagine that at the moment because he's everywhere. But Simon Sinek's TED Talk, getting to why, and he talks about the 3 circles. If you haven't watched that video, or if you haven't watched it in the last 12 months, go back and watch it again. Like seriously, I pull that thing up probably once every 6 months because I still find it inspiring. It's still rings true to this day. And quite frankly, it changed my perspective on how I actually looked at businesses and how I looked at, culture. So go and have a watch of that. Try to get clear on what is your why for your business. Why do you exist? And by the way, it can't be just to make money. That's not an inspiring kind of vision that anybody is going to follow. In fact, when we went through this vision framework with one of our clients, he said to me, Simon, can't we just kind of put up there that we'll just do what we did last year, but a little bit more? And after I finished laughing, I was saying, that is the most uninspiring thing I've ever heard. And while it might motivate you, it doesn't motivate anyone else in your firm. So what is your why? And we're going to touch a little bit more on this in a moment, but what is your why? And then how do you break that down into some kind of coherent story that actually could have meaning for people? It's going to be absolutely critical. Of course, on the back of that, you need some long-term goals, right? And that ultimately will come around to financial goals as well as other types of goals. And those goals are really the rallying call for your people. It's what gives them focus. I'm a big believer that everybody in your company should have a number on something. It's something they're trying to achieve that is measurable. And so, it starts at a very high level for your company and then gets broken down into sub-goals and sub-tasks right down through the organization so that everybody knows they are working on something that contributes to the big picture. And by the way, this speaks to human motivation, right? This sense of I am working on something that is larger than myself is a part of the culture, but critical to understanding human behavior and human motivations. So I'm going to share another video that changed my life in terms of the way I looked at business and looked at culture and looked at people. And it's by a guy named Dan Pink. By the way, we're going to send you some links to this stuff, so don't feel like you need to be Googling in a hurry at the moment. But Dan Pink is a guy, he's written a number of books on human motivation and selling and all this sort of stuff, but he talks about these studies that were done on what drives human behavior and what motivates them. And to that end, he talks about money being a motivator, but only to a point. Because once people get enough money that they are no longer worried about money, in other words, you're taking money off the table as an issue, it really drops down the rank in terms of priority. And really after that, it's the three things. One is people want to be self-directed. They don't want to be micromanaged. They want to have mastery in their life, as in they want to be able to do things that they can get better at. And the third, and this is the critical one, they want to have a sense of purpose. They want to work on something that is bigger than themselves. They feel like they're contributing to something special. It has meaning, right? So this is the thing. I'm spending a lot of time on this step one because, frankly, this is where it all starts and ends. Everything else you can kind of work out because if you don't have this part of your business built out and messaged properly, you're going to find it really, really hard to do all those next steps. Okay. Excuse me. All right. So, by the way, Dan Pink did a cool TED Talk as well. There's an animated version of it. I'll send you the links. It's great. If you just watch those two videos, honestly, you are going to get so much value out of that alone that I know it's going to have a big impact in your world. Step two. So step one was establish your vision framework. Step two is get clear on the personal objectives for all of your stakeholders. Now, when I talk stakeholders, most people kind of think shareholders. And yes, clearly the shareholders are going to be critical in any business, in the growth of any business, and certainly in any succession plan. But stakeholders does mean more than that, right? And so here I want to reference a guy by the name of John Davis. He's a professor out of Harvard. He's spent his life studying family business, and he came up with a model which is basically a three-circle diagram. Now, we're all familiar with Venn diagrams, right? It's almost a cliche that every industry has to have a Venn diagram they use, but this one's actually really good. I probably should have thrown up a picture here, but you'll get what I'm saying. Imagine the three circles that overlap, and in each circle, one represents employees, one circle represents shareholders, and one circle represents family members, okay? Now, they're all critical stakeholders in your business, right? But where the three circles overlap, it suddenly starts to create all these different types of stakeholders. So for example, I could be a shareholder and an employee and a family member because I'm the founder of my own company. But I might have somebody who's in my family and an employee, but doesn't own shares. Maybe I've got a business partner that owns shares and they're an employee, but they're not part of my family. So as these circles intersect, you actually get 7 different types of stakeholders who, quite frankly, usually have their own agenda, their own wishes, their own desires that may be very, very different to yours. Okay. And this is where things start getting complex, right? You know, especially if you've got more than one shareholder in your business. You know, I sometimes liken it to a big bowl of spaghetti. You know, when I go into businesses and they're talking to me about succession and, you know, there's family dramas and business dramas and it's all overlaid and it's complex and, you know, hey, we pulled this lever to solve that problem, but then 2 other problems popped up and it's this whole whack-a-mole thing, right? The reason I say it's like a bowl of spaghetti is because it's really looks messy and sometimes it just takes a long time to unpick it and understand what the key strands are. So, excuse me, have a think about what are your personal objectives for this business? What are the objectives of the other key stakeholders in your world? How do you have a conversation around that is respectful and allows people to have a voice that's not concerned or worried or fearful of upsetting everybody else, so that you can start to align around core objectives and frankly, the direction you're going to head in. And by the way, you're never going to get this right the first time, okay? If you start to have these types of conversations, expect that it's probably going to be a bit clunky and a bit awkward at first. But more importantly, rather than necessarily pulling together 5 or 6 different stakeholders and you're all going to land on one lovely goal that just aligns everybody, think of it more as you've got a compass, and really rather than going around and around in circles at the moment, what you want to do is at least narrow things down and start heading in one direction. Now that direction might be kind of north, northeast, somewhere that way, but you know, you're heading in a broad direction now rather than spinning wheels. Okay. That would be a good first step in this sort of process. And of course, as you're moving in that direction, things will start to narrow over time and you can start to be more clear on the actual outcomes or objectives you're trying to achieve. I'm already at the 20-minute mark. So I'm going to keep going on these steps and I will try to move quickly. And I'm going to start weaving through, as we did last time, some of the questions that I get as they're relevant to the different steps. Step 3 is map your key competencies. So in other words, what are the key factors you need to be able to run your business? Now I'm going to share a little tool here. I'm going to try to share my screen and a slide and hopefully this will all work. Bear with me one moment. The reason I want to share this with you is because I think a lot of people get a little bit confused about how to view their organization. So hopefully you can all see my screen now. This should look fairly familiar to everybody. It's a classic org chart, right? And when I think most people look at this, they'll go, yep, marketing, sales, ops, I get it. And there's lots of fancy titles, right? Now, of course, depending on how big your business is, you know, this is just an example. You may not have this many people. You may have more. But I just think that this is possibly not the best way or most productive way to look at your company. You know, instead of looking at traditional silo-built companies, have a think about what are the actual processes and outcomes, what are the things you're trying to achieve, and align yourself around more of a process chart than an org chart. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, here's a different example of what you're looking at here. There we go. So instead of starting with a CEO at the top, why don't we start with what your purpose is, why you actually exist? That's your goal. That's what you're trying to achieve, right? You know, I know with Exit Advisory, our goal is to fundamentally help business owners maximize the value out of their business journey. Like that's what it is. It's about adding value. Of course, right under that, people clearly need to make a profit. And most businesses will be geared around how do we make profit? So if you start putting that as your top objectives, you start to think quite differently about how you might structure your organization. So for example, straight under make profit, it might be generate revenue. We need to deliver the services. So in other words, so we actually do what we said we're going to do to get paid. And then of course, you've got other things like manage financial obligations and risk. You know, I think business, we overcomplicate things a little bit in business. really you want to generate revenue, you want to deliver on what you're doing, and hopefully do some good in the world while you're doing it. But I'm not going to spend too long on this because time is tight. But if you think about how your customers come into your world and how they engage and work with your organization, they tend to work from left to right. They don't work up and down in the silos that, the way you've structured your business. So, you're generating leads, you're converting leads, you're delivering, you're collecting money, you're managing risk. I would just suggest that as you start to think about the capabilities of your company and what you need to do to drive profit, you can start to think about your business, how you structure things in a slightly different way. So I'm going to now stop sharing. Here we go. Hopefully that's helped. Now, quick other poll here, because it's going to be relevant to that kind of org chart that we've just discussed. I'd be interested to know, no, it's not going to. I'm going to try and launch this next poll, and it's not allowing me to click the launch button. There you go. It's, I don't know why it would be doing that after all the training I've just received. No doubt it's here we go, stop sharing, that's why. Okay. No. And there we go, launch. How many employees do you have? And we're talking full-time equivalents here, right? So if you've got 2 people who work part-time, half days, that's 1 employee equivalent. If you've got a contractor who works in your business for, 2 weeks out of the month, well, that's a half employee and so forth. Now, this is pretty critical, right? Because the way you're going to approach succession planning is going to vary based on the structure of your organization. So, is it just yourself? Do you have 1 to 5 people? Is it 50 plus? Like, what does the structure of your organization look like? I probably should have thrown in a question here about whether you sell products or services, because even that can change the way you think about certain elements of succession planning. All right, so I'm going to leave that poll open for a few minutes and just move on to the next step. So step 4 is actually to choose a successor. Now, what's interesting about this point is I actually think too many business owners get caught up on finding that unicorn that can replace them. I run an architecture firm, as I'm just making up an example here, but I run an architecture firm, an engineering firm, or whatever it might be. I need to find somebody who has my skills, is really good at sales, lives in the same area as me, loves doing what they do, and basically can tell the jokes the same way I tell them. Well, frankly, certainly in my case, I wouldn't want somebody like that sitting next to me. I'd probably find them really irritating. But at the end of the day, if you're trying to find somebody to be another little kind of mini version of you, you're going to struggle with this process. And by the way, all you've really done is transfer the issues and risk that you're having today onto somebody else. So you're not building value, you're not de-risking your company, you're just transferring risk and shuffling it onto somebody else's plate. And by the way, giving them an enormous amount of power over you in any negotiations you have. So when I say choosing a successor, what I would typically advocate is, if you're going to step down out of your business and you're going to literally hand the reins over to somebody else, sure, you might need somebody to be that CEO role or that leadership role. But I see succession more in the terms of the competencies that we talked about. And so if you as a founder of your business do 3 major things, right? Like, let's say you do strategy and the big picture thinking, you're fantastic at systemizing and you do sales. Well, start to think about how to break down those key competencies that you're responsible for. And instead of shuffling all of them onto somebody else's plate, have a think about whether or not you can train others to start taking over individual components of what you focus on, okay? It's a far more strategic way to think about succession. It's a much lower risk in terms of handing on responsibility, and it builds a far better foundation for growth. So, of course, if you are going to find that successor, one of the big things you're going to have to do is think about not culture first, but then also remuneration and incentives. Okay, and that's probably a webinar into itself. But how you pay people goes from everything from your wages and salaries and superannuation that you are required to pay by law, through to bonuses, you've got KPI linked bonuses, you can go into things like profit share, you can get into shadow or phantom equity, and then ultimately even equity in your business. And I know we've had a few questions about offering equity and the best way to do that with your staff. There are lots of different ways to do that. I'm not going to be able to get through them all in detail on this in this session. I'll try to pick it up again in a little bit in this call towards the end, but if you've got specifics around that, it might be easier to jump on a call with somebody in the team, possibly myself, and we'll go through it. But choosing a successor. So think about what is the cross-section of skills that you would need for somebody to step into that leadership role. And once again, it doesn't necessarily have to mirror what you do. It just needs to be perhaps what are the core couple of things that really you're not going to hand off to somebody else in the team. Step 5 is set up your successor for success. Don't hire somebody and then hamstring them, right? You need to give them enough time to learn the ropes. You need to be paying them enough that they're not worried about money, for starters. One of the big things is, if people are stressing about the pay packet and what they've got and it's not enough and it's frustrating, they're never going to be giving you their best work. They're going to be thinking about their next move and, why did I really do this? And there's regret and all the rest of it. So set them up for success. Bring them on into a fantastic culture. Give them a good remuneration system that's fair and, let's be honest, performance-based to some degree. And then give them the time and the room and the support to actually make them or help them be successful in this new role. Step 6 is the transition process. And the key word here is not necessarily transition. We know this is about transition. It's process. It's a process here, right? One of the things I'm going to share with you about delegation, and it's something that I live by, is there are 4 real key steps to making sure somebody is going to be really effective. And by the way, this model doesn't just apply if you're trying to hire a CEO. It's probably even used far more at different levels in the organization. So here's the thing, right? You want somebody to be really good at that thing, that X, that particular skill. The 4 steps are: I do, you watch. Second step is I do, you help. Third step is you do, I help. And the 4th step, of course, is you do and I watch, right? Now, if you take somebody through that 4-stage process, you will be guaranteed that they know how to do it at the end, assuming they're there because they have some basic level of competency. So, those are the 4 key steps to ensure that you're setting that person up for success and they're going through a transition process that is going to work, okay? If you're not doing that in your own business right now, if that's not how you're training people, please factor that in. I'm going to throw some more stuff around those steps later. So if you haven't written it all down, don't worry, we'll get to you and make sure you've got it. Step 7, trust your judgment, right? I think too often, we take these kind of steps when whether it's you've hired somebody or you're starting to go through this process. And like buyer's remorse, sometimes we all start second guessing ourselves as soon as we pull the trigger. I think if you've prepared yourself properly, you understand that this is a process that takes time. You've got some good milestones that the right candidate will be crossing those milestones in an orderly and timely manner. Then trust that you've set this up properly. And ultimately, people are going to come at these things from a different perspective. They're going to have their own set of skills, experiences. They're not you, right? So, and by the way, you're hiring them for that. You want them to bring fresh ideas, fresh approaches to what you're doing. So if they don't come out of the blocks and do things the way you thought they should have been done, then step 8, keep an open mind here, right? Keep it, trust that you've hired them for the right reason, but keep an open mind. And that really is step 8. Make sure that you're just, there's not necessarily one absolute right way to do anything. I'm a big believer that there's no black and white in life. There's only 1,000 shades of gray, right? We're all living in different shades. So keep an open mind that there might be a lot of different ways to do a particular task or handle a particular problem. And I think, if you can be the type of person who steps back and watches and observes and asks questions, then you're probably A, going to learn a lot yourself, but B, you might see some really innovative ways to tackle problems in a different way. Now, this is something that actually happens really well in the corporate world. The corporate world being as large as it is, but employees move from company to company so very quickly. And so really, good ideas spread super fast in the corporate world. How you handle a problem in one industry, could be applied to other industries, etc. In a lot of family businesses, that cross-pollination of ideas doesn't happen as fast. So, and a lot of it is big down to the fact that they're not as big, but they don't have people moving in and out as often. So, you're not necessarily seeing or hearing what other companies in other industries are doing to solve the same problems that you have. Excuse me. So I'm going to recap those 8 steps very, very quickly here. Just for revision, once again, we've got a tool that we're going to provide, so don't feel like you have to write things down really quickly. But step 1 is establish your vision framework, meaning everything from your why down to your long-term goals and ultimately annual plans and 90-day action plans. And I repeat, if you haven't got that framework, that structure in your business today, please reach out. We can get on a call. There's no obligation to do anything. It's more just talk through it a little bit and help you sort of zoom in on how you might apply that. Step 2, get clear on the personal objectives for all of your stakeholders. Step 3, map your key competencies. Step 4, choose a successor if you're actually stepping out of the day-to-day. Step 5, set your successor up for success. Step 6 is manage the transition process. By the way, it starts with having a process, right? Don't just wing it. There's too many things at stake here. This is far too important to make it up as you go, okay? Step 7, trust your judgment, all right? You've been around, you've done a lot of stuff in business and in life. You're going to be able to make good decisions because your brain's been trained to do it. So trust that even though you may be in an area of uncertainty and you may not know what is around the corner, you have the tools and skills to navigate this. And of course, if you need help with it, then reach out, right? And even if it's not us, reach out to people that you know, trust. And I'm going to underscore something here for you. If you're getting advice from people, make sure that they're equipped to give you advice. I used to always laugh when I was back in the solar game and, somebody telling me their neighbor, John, who's a plumber, was telling them all about, they shouldn't do solar or they should do solar. I'm thinking, oh, John he's a plumber. He's not a, electrical engineer or a solar guy. So get advice from people who are equipped to give it. And that could be anybody from any range, but if you don't have someone in your world, reach out. Step 8, keep an open mind. And geez, is that not just a good policy for life anyway, right? Keep an open mind, before we jump to sort of judgments and things like that, is just take the view that there could be lots of different ways and better ways to solve problems in your world. Okay. We're almost at the 40-minute mark. I've been trying to pepper in comments that are answering some of the key questions. So, but we've only got 2 minutes left for the 40 minutes. So if you're pressed for time, if you're concerned about going over the 40-minute mark, I'm flagging it with you. No problem if you need to jump out. You can always circle back if you have some more questions. What I will do now, though, is I'll spend up to maximum 20 minutes more answering some more questions that have come through. So please, love to have you on board for the next section if you can't understand completely. All right, so rolling on. And I think we probably finished that poll, didn't we? So I can shut that down and perhaps we might even have one last sneaky one that we'll throw in there if we get a moment. So for whoever's interested, I'll share those results with you, by the way. So a couple of people in here that are just thinking about their own succession and maybe they're running their own business. There could be a one-man band at the moment thinking about moving to that next step. A lot of people in the 1 to 5 category there, so about 38%. Some in the 11 to 20, that makes sense. This is classically following the sort of trend that we see in businesses. I was going to say in Australia, but really it's the Western world. There's a lot of businesses that are in that sort of 1 to 10 space. And then really it's sort of less companies as you get bigger and bigger, but probably stating the obvious. All right, cool. I'm going to stop sharing that and let's get on with some of your questions. Now, I did have a question about whether it was a good idea to keep the business in the family. Do I hand it down to my sons, daughters, etc.? Look, it's a really good question. And, go back to the stats that we had at the beginning of the show. We know that it's not happening as much as it used to. and for very good reasons. I think when you consider holding on to a business in a family, there's a few things that you really need to factor into your thinking. One, do you have people in the family that are equipped to take over the business in the first place? I chuckled because I had a client once and I asked him that question, is there anyone in the family that, you'd like to hand down to? And he said, oh, I've got a son, but he couldn't take over the business. And I said, oh, well, why is that? And he goes, well, because he's a bloody idiot. So I had a bit of a chuckle with him and I thought, well, smart. If he's not capable and you don't believe he's the right person, or she in your daughter's case, then don't push it onto them, right? Similarly, by the way, if they're not equipped, but they're pushing to take over, you have, well, I'm going to get a little bit formal here with your governance, but as the director of your own company, you have an obligation to make decisions that are in the best interests of your company, right? Now, it might be family owned and all the rest of it, but you've really got to put that director hat on and say, who would be the best person to lead this business going forward? Now, if that happens to be your daughter or your son, fantastic. Do the transition process. If it's not your son or your daughter or somebody else in the extended family, then you're going to have to look outside that. And once again, this will come down to process, right? So that's one element. If you're thinking about family succession, is do you have the right people to take over? The second part of this, and this is a really important one, I think I may have mentioned this in the last webinar, but it comes down to looking at your business as an asset, right? If you're going to step out of the day-to-day and you're not going to be running the business anymore, that means you are dependent on somebody else to run this company for you. Now, what I would say is, if your business represents a significant portion of your wealth, and I've seen this with so many of our clients where their business is worth 50, 60, 80, even in one case, % of their net worth, more than their home, more than anything else they owned, then you've really got to ask the question of, should you have that level of concentration in what is ultimately your investment portfolio? A business is an asset. It's not you, and it's not personal. Well, it can be personal, I get it. You run your business, you're passionate about it. But ultimately, as a business owner, and when you put that hat on, I want you to be able to step back from it and see it as an asset for a moment and say, okay, well, what is it in the mix of my world of investments? And as I say, look, frankly, even if it's 20% of your net worth, you've got to ask whether it makes sense from an investment perspective. And I'm not a financial advisor giving you financial advice here, but does it make sense to continue to hold that asset if you're no longer going to be at the helm running it and really watching it and managing it? That's a much broader question. If you have an accountant or a financial planner, advisor in your life, it might be worth having that discussion. If you don't have anybody, reach out. I'm happy to recommend people, but get clear on whether or not you should be keeping the business in your family from both an opportunity and that risk perspective. Interested to know what you're going to do to ensure your business is attractive to prospective buyers down the track. Yeah, I highlighted that one because really we're talking succession here is about de-risking your business, right? So reducing risk, but also building a platform for growth. Now, those two levers, if you're on the previous webinar, we talked a bit about those two levers, those two lenses to look at your business. And, really succession is such a wonderful tool for this, because if you go to sell your company and you're the leader, the rainmaker, you do all the key things, and pretty much if you're not there, the business ceases to exist or ceases to generate revenue, well, then I'm going to tell you that you probably A, can't sell your business at all, or B, if you do manage to sell it, your valuation is going to get crushed by those risk factors. So how do you make it attractive to buyers? Well, you look at this thing as your business is an asset that generates profit. And if your profit does that with minimal risk around people, process, systems, then your business will be worth more. Okay, so succession and business valuation and exiting is all very, very closely linked. I've had a few questions here asking me about timing. When should I start thinking about succession? When should I start thinking about succession in terms of selling? When lots of stuff around timing and really ultimately exiting. What I would say to that is give yourself as much runway as possible here, right? You don't want to wake up one day and be kind of sick and tired of the business and you just want to get out and suddenly you're trying to find people to replace you. That's a bad way to come at it. So I think if you step back once again and say, I am going to exit my business one day, whether I like it or not. And so if you operate on that premise, you can start to think a little more objectively about what does succession actually look like and how can I use the time available to do this in a lower risk fashion. You know, if you've got a long time, you can start to train other people. You can start to do it in a way that's a little more systemized, but you're not in a rush, right? You're not suddenly needing someone to fill your shoes in 3 months' time. So, excuse me. Time is if you've got time on your side, then it reduces risk. That's the guts of that. Should I hire a CEO to replace me in anticipation of an exit and as part of succession? Do you know, it's a funny one. I've seen people hire CEOs and it almost sent them to the wall, literally almost sent them broke. Why? Because the CEO, A, cost a lot of money, so it was hitting them in their expense lines. But two, they hired the wrong person and it almost sent their business broke. So it's a really important thing to consider. Ultimately, once again, time, if you've got it, will be your friend. I would once again go back to my original comments around process and capabilities, because if you can start to take responsibilities off your plate, even if they're, you know, a subsection of a process or a responsibility you have, it's easier to start spreading out some of the risk across multiple different people in your business. Hiring a CEO might be the answer in the end. But geez, I would want to make sure that I've got the time to find the right people, the time to bring them on board and train them and make sure it goes smoothly, set them up for success. And you've got some really, really clear goals that are very measurable on determining whether that person is the right person. It might be a bit of a brash sort of expression, but you know, people often talk about you know, taking a long time to hire and quick to fire. I think I don't like that expression because I think it's a bit flippant about people in their roles in their lives. But I think when you're talking about such a critical thing like a CEO, you need to be able to determine fairly quickly if they're the right fit. Hopefully you've done a lot of that prior to hiring them, but sometimes you need to be ready to move. So, so keep that in mind. Plowing on here, I've got a couple more minutes. Are we better off thinking about selling internally or externally? It's more of a selling question, but talks around a bit of succession. So this person was wondering whether they should be selling shares or giving shares to people internally more as a part of a succession plan. Look, I think this goes back to the incentives we talked about before. So having the right incentive programs and aligning that, by the way, with performance is going to be critical. What I will say again is that I think there's a lot of stuff out there in the press and just content in general about employee share programs. And I think there's a lot of people that are talking about share programs, employee share programs, as kind of this panacea for all problems in their business. Look, I don't subscribe to that view. I think employee share programs can be done really well, and I think that they can provide value. But it's not a solution for a poor culture. It's not a solution for longevity in terms of retention of staff. I can hear a whole bunch of people virtually screaming at me around this right now. I don't think probably some of them have seen some of the studies that I've seen that have been done by prominent Australian universities around employee share programs that say they, after doing this for many years, they could not find a direct link between giving employees shares and actually improving culture or retaining staff. The reality was, in most cases, that by giving their staff shares, the staff just saw it as a part of the pay package, and it was just part of the overall number. So when they got approached by other people for a new job, they simply sat there and said, well, my salary plus all the shares and et cetera is worth X. These guys are offering me X plus. And so really it didn't do a lot to retain staff, and it really didn't do a lot to make employees necessarily behave like owners. So really interesting study. Once again, horses for courses, right? I've seen employee share programs work really well. And frankly, where it's worked well, it's been an add-on to what was already an exceptional culture and an exceptionally well-run organization. You don't have those two things, I wouldn't even bother with an employee share program because the real work hasn't been done yet. Okay. If you're having trouble around that, look, reach out to us. We can also recommend you to other people who might be able to specialize in certain areas that you need help with. Okay. There's a bunch of other little questions here that I think some of them are probably a little more related to actually selling and going to market. We are doing one more session in this series in 2 weeks from today, talking about how to prepare your business for sale. So what I would say is if you've got more questions that I haven't answered today, two things. One, potentially come to that next session because we're going to get really specific on some of the things you need to do to prep. Two, reach out, right? In fact, I think I've got a link here. I believe I have a link here. Give me 1 second. I'll try to share it on screen for you to make life easy. Where is it? Here we go. I think I can drop this into the chat. So chat, here we go. There's a link. There's a link to book a call. There's no cost to coming and having a call. There's no cost to you to have a discussion with everybody. As you're having a look at that, I'm going to throw in my third question. It is a little bit of a cheeky question, but I would certainly appreciate your answers. It's the old NPS. We should be measuring our business. This is something I'm going to talk to you about, how to prepare your business for sale. How likely would you be to recommend this session to somebody you know? Appreciate your answers here. And certainly your feedback. If you really think I've missed something today that is critical, shoot me an email. I'm so open to feedback here, and I would love to evolve this and make sure we're adding more value to you and anybody else in our respective worlds. So please, I'd welcome your answers on all of those. Finally, one of the things that I know is absolutely true about all of us on this call is that as humans, we learn from stories. We learn from hearing about other people on their journey. We learn from other people's mistakes, probably not enough in my case, because I keep making a lot of my own mistakes. But if that resonates and you agree that you learn a lot from hearing about other people's journey and stories, then I'd invite you to come along and check out the Buy, Grow, Sell podcast. I think we're up to 85, 86, 87 episodes or something like that are live. There's a lot more coming, by the way. But I've interviewed so many amazing people who have bought, grown, sold companies. They've done it in lots of different ways. They've valued their companies in different ways. So many of them have made horrible, devastating mistakes and then recovered. If you like hearing about other people on their journey, then pop along and go and have a look at some of the episodes there. By the way, if you want to hear episodes about specific issues like earnouts, about transition plans, stuff like that, shoot me a message too. I can get our team to try to pick out a couple of episodes that'll be more specific to what you're looking for. Look, I actually get so much out of talking to those wonderful guests, and I learn from them as I'm doing it. So I know that I get value. I'm hoping you'll get value as well. So I think that's probably it for today. I'm going to, I will stop that poll. Thank you all for those who answered. I really do appreciate your feedback. If there's anything else we can do to deliver value in your world, please reach out to me. I am reasonably accessible and I'm very happy to get back to you. So thank you all again. Thank you for attending. I hope to see you in a fortnight. If there's anybody in your world that you think could benefit from this series, please shoot them an email, let them know about it. I do appreciate you sharing it, and always happy to add value to whoever we can. Thanks very much for your time.